Hello, hello, hello. My name is Alexander Speaks, and welcome to a Grimoire Ramble. If this is your first one, this is where I pull out my Grimoire and I ramble. And you may want to pull out for yourself a Grimoire, a sketchbook, a journal, a diary, some household chores, or anything really that you, my bestie, wants company while working on. Please feel free to pull out yourself a cup of cool water because I know I never get enough. These rambles are typically on the cuff and full of imperfections for the imperfect artist. And with that out of the way, let me tell you what I'm going to be working on and what I'll be rambling about. In my grimoire today, I'll be working on a 2-card oracle art spell centered on my feelings of politics today. And I'll be rambling about my artistic process, how I balance long-term projects, adding activism into my practice, refilling inspiration and capability of creation on the go, an oracle reading, and more. And with that out of the way, let's get started. Let's get started by saying that I had actually originally filmed and recorded this audio you're listening to a couple times. So I had already done this Grimoire Ramble and had done a couple more Grimoire Rambles just because I like to preemptively prepare. And that's part of my artistic process is like, I want to have all my projects, have all my ideas already set in stone. A lot of, from what I'm learning about the YouTube process was the hours it takes just to record, just to collect everything. So it can take an hour just to do the artwork, and then it can take an hour separately of speaking, and then it can take 1 to 2 hours just to, edit everything after the 2 to 3 hours of uploading it, and then it's another 2 to 3 hours after that just to, after you upload it from your recording device to your laptop, then from your laptop to YouTube. So I had prepared in batch a couple YouTube videos that were all Grimoire Rambles, and then I was listening to it and I was like, nah, I just don't like it. I do not like it. I don't like, at least for this video, the audio that I had, I didn't like how sick I sounded. I didn't like how nasally I sounded. I didn't like a lot of things I was saying. This is a Grimoire Ramble, but even I was like, oh, this is a little off topic. This is rambling a little bit too far, The whole point is I work on my Grimoire and I ramble. And I talk about a certain collection of themes and topics, but those are the ones I stick to, and at least I am coherent in the conversation. At least it's from point A to point B to point C to point D, And like specifically, I noticed that when I was listening to this video again, I just realized that like what I had said, was it informative? Did it help? Yes. But also I had made a mistake, which was I had split the audio in 3 files instead of 1. So I had to edit 3 different clips as if they were 1 and make it sound like it's the same volume. And then I had noticed that it wasn't as sharp as I wanted it to be. Not in like the voice clarity, but we're talking about politics here. There is the expectation that your words have a bite, and I wanted to give you a bite. I wanted to give you some like teeth and claws in my speech, so to speak. Not to say that I wanted to give you some like hostility. That's not what I'm saying. But I wanted to at least be able to say, I put this forward. I hope you like it. And I had put my foot down and said, this is exactly what I think. This is exactly how I think. And also that all of that just being aside as a footnote on my artistic process, which is what this Grimoire Ramble is about. So the spread that you're looking at right now, it is a 2-card oracle art spell centered on my feelings of politics today, using an oracle deck that I had created and I do plan on offering for free as the Misaligned Prayer Oracle. And the whole point of this was like, I wanted to express how I was feeling and get it out of me in a way that is authentic to how I feel. Because I personally believe that, people, when they do the artist way, they do the morning pages, which is like 3 pages of spare journaling every single day. And part of it is just like a creative dump to empty out your mind, empty out all the little shit that's in your head. And I'm gonna be honest, I don't do the morning pages. I did the artist way. Sorry, I did the artist way, and I will say I got a lot out of it. I'll say later that I didn't, because it's 50-50 on what I got. But I don't do the morning pages anymore. And I think for me, it's just because I just believe in getting it out anyways, not just in journal form. I will complain and complain and complain as much as I want. And the morning pages aren't really about complaining, but I'll do it anyways, just for fun. I'll complain just because, I think, it's that time of the day. I need a little pep in my step by being a little petty and angry and upset for no good reason. And I'll get whatever I want to say, or I need to say it out of me. And it will literally be to no one at all. But, that doesn't fix everything, I personally don't do the morning pages just for me, because my hand hurts after writing 3 pages. I have to seek alternatives to mediate for the fact that writing 3 pages freeform does hurt my hands. And a lot of time, I am not a morning person. I am a night person. And I know you can do morning pages whenever, but I'd rather just get it out whenever I can in the morning. But I can't do that if my hand hurts all the time. And when morning pages, when I do them, or when I don't do them and I don't get everything out, there's still something that's left behind. There's still something that I want to express. And sometimes the expression is less I see gets this off my chest, but more of I want to know, how could I phrase this, or how would I visualize this? I want to express it in a way that isn't verbally. Then I'll do stuff like this, where I have little artistic little whatevers that I try to express my art as a form of catharsis, And it doesn't have to be art that I share. It doesn't have to be. There's been plenty of times where, I wrote out how I felt. I drew out how I felt. In Rebel Witch, Kellyanne Maddox talks about a screaming into your pillow ritual. I haven't done that, but I've definitely been very rude and very mean and vocal and aggressive to my pillow, and been how could this have happened? I've had bad days myself, but it's still about me getting it out of me. It's still about me expressing something. It's about me testing something. It's about me experimenting and getting whatever thought process in me out of me. And that's just the way that I, as an artist, I guess you could say, am trying to get whatever I need to get out of me in the way that the morning pages typically would, if it was as successful for me as it was with other people. I also think that it behooves me that my artistic process doesn't lend itself to, or at least it doesn't typically lend itself to, the question of does the art piece, did what I make, does it look good? And that is something that I really want to stress. I want to point it out, just because it's something that I'm not saying that I don't see other people do from the point of view of oh, look at me, but more of, this is something that I do that I feel has really freed me, artistically speaking. So the way that my artistic process works, largely speaking, there are exceptions, there are, deviations from it, but the main process for me as of right now, as of time of recording November 28th, 2024, is that I collect projects, and the projects are experiments. They're hypothesis, they're thesis statements. They're saying, what if I did this like that? Or what would it look like for this to be made and for this to be the theme of it? So, for example, I have I have a couple tarot decks that are, for me, the way I understand it. These decks are thematic, right? They have their own themes, they have their own explorations into the topics and the genres that they are specifically like head-on themed about. You have decks that are themed about mermaids, and for example, I have a one deck called the Goracle, and every card is themed around like a murder or a way of death in a horror movie, right? I have some decks that are their explorations in philosophy, and for me, the way I process it is that these artistic projects, they're great, they're wonderful in their own merit. They care more about expressing that point of view and the idea than worrying about, oh, does this look good? And will it look good on the wall in a museum? If I showed this to someone, would they say, that's a really good painting? And that's what I really do for myself, is I try to think about my artistic projects as like, is it going to be answering the question that I provided? And that's for artistic projects, and that's not for individual works. So if I have a tarot deck or an oracle deck, even though, like, tarot is technically an oracle deck, just with the structure that we all know. But if you have like these big projects, I try to say, okay, let's push it. Let's say that this is a project I want to do, and I want to explore XYZ things with an XYZ influence, and I'm trying to answer the question. So, for an example, I'm going to share something just for people who are listening now. I'm very much, artistically speaking, like a private person. If I have a project, it's very hard for me to share it before it's all done and it's all ready. And also, I have an order of operations for my projects in which I share it. So I'm trying to think. Online, I have shared, let me count. Yeah, I've shared 3 decks maybe, and no, 4 decks. I've shared 4 decks, and I have a 5th one that's already finished. But I'm working on my 6th deck right now. And the 6th deck is, well, I'm going to just say the name of it. It's going to be called Maximalist Marseille. So, if you've ever seen, I'm going to tell you where the inspiration came from, and then I'm going to go over the thought process and the experiment. So, if you've ever seen Chowder, the TV show, and its main synopsis, which isn't really important to it, but just, because I like to share. It's that young Chowder dreams of becoming a chef someday. He works as an apprentice to a famous chef, Mundal, who is always offering Chowder advice on love and cooking. Panini also wants to work in the kitchen and thinks Chowder is her boyfriend, while Schnitzel is a rock monster who doesn't think much of Chowder and his smelly best friend Kimchi, the stinky cloud. And the animation style for this TV show is that you have the character, and there's always some article of clothing that isn't static on the character. So the character will be moving up and down, laughing, doing whatever, and whatever article of clothing it is, and you really have to see it to understand it. It's a pattern on the clothes that it's almost as if, like, if you're thinking about it, there's 2 layers. There's the character that's moving, and then there's the article of clothing pattern. And the pattern is consistently changing on the character, as if the 2 layers were acting distinctly separate. And I found that particularly inspiring. And I began to, that sounded weird, I began to think about a Marseille and how plain it is, how flat it is, which is, it's by design. Side note, I can already tell, just because I don't particularly feel the best, I can tell that this audio is going to be a little nasally, and I'm okay with that. But at least it'll be coherent. But the design of the Marseille Tarot, it's very flat, like a playing card. It has its own history. And for me personally, it has its own problems, right? So I don't really read much into Thoth. Runes, yes. Tarot, the Rider-Waite-Smith, Marseille, other styles, Oracle, Lenormand got me down. I think Thoth is like the only thing that I have Thoth decks. I just don't read it like a Thoth deck. But Marseille decks, they have their own history and they have their own reasonings for why they look that way. But I began to think about history and the lack of patterns, the lack of bright, vivid colors, the lack of vibrance, juxtaposed to this children's animation show, and the bright colors, the bright patterns, and everything clashing together. And then I started to think about history and history in general, and specifically this idea of the love of color, of clashing patterns as quote-unquote tacky, and how there's this book called Chromophobia, and there's lots of examples of tackiness, of color, of vibrance being associated with the other, with being black, with being queer, with being anything other than white and heterosexual. Almost to say that existing without color and pattern is to be expected of the norm, but outside of that indicates some level of lacking class, whatever that means. I think about the lack of color, the erasure of color, really, from those white marble statues that, almost every witch has some version of a white marble statue on their altar. At least the ones that I've seen, everyone loves the white marble statue. Everyone loves it. A little marble column here or there. And it turns out that these statues, they're not white. I mean, they're white now, right? But it turned out that in connection to that, the scene of color as garish and queer, these statues were actually full of color, and the people who were excavating these were brushing off, removing, and hiding color from these statues. They were pretending as if these statues were not full of color and vibrance. And I see a lot of creative reworking of these statues in art today, where people will have like the statue of David. Not that it's an ancient Greek statue, but they'll have the statue of David, or they'll have other Greek statues, and they'll have it be bright, beautiful colors. But that connection of stripping color from artifacts is not an isolated experience just in Greek. It happens with other excavations, such as like Egyptian excavations. But it was these anthropologists who wanted to remove color, who wanted to remove any semblance of the other from these white marble statues, to create the white marble statues, to create the symbol of whiteness. And there is actually like a history of violence in trying to maintain the status quo that these statues were white and were always white. There's a very famous quote of someone who they repainted one of the statues in the original colors, and a very prominent person was quoted as saying it looks like, quote, like a cross-dresser hailing for a taxi. So a cultural hatred and fear of color and boldness is pretty imbued and enchanted into our culture today. And I was taking all of these conversations about the fear of color, the fear of otherness, queerness, Chowder, the TV show, Marseille, flatness, like I was mixing that all together. And I was like, what if I take the Marseille deck, which for many people epitomizes, whether they want to admit it or not, whiteness in the divination sphere. And what if I turn it upside down and I flip it on its head? What if I use all of my inspirations as conversation starters to really push the idea and the narrative that, for lack of better words, like a Marseille deck doesn't have to be flat and lacking color. Now I've seen some Marseille decks that were inherently trying to be diverse, right? I love diverse tarot decks. I do not like these diverse decks, right? There is a difference between including people of different ethnic and racial backgrounds and different points of view within your tarot deck versus taking the image of a white person and recoloring it as if they were black. That's just like digital blackface, basically. That's not something that I'm really here for. I'm looking for true, authentic representation. And that experiment into taking a Marseille, which can be fairly minimalistic, and pushing it to the opposite side of the spectrum as a maximalist art piece that is full of color and vibrancy. And even like, there's going to be 2 versions of this deck, spoiler alert, but even the restricted version, it's still overflowing with vibrancy, and the unrestricted version, which is colors and patterns and everything everywhere, it still has some level of like, you can see the structure, it makes sense, but this isn't about fitting into notions. It truly is a Marseille that speaks on its own, that says, I'm going to be purposely difficult and different. And I like that. Now, that was a big roundabout way of saying that, like, this is an exploration. This is a project where I'm not trying to make this Marseille look the best. I'm not looking for people to say, oh yes, a true Marseille. That's a real Marseille. I need to have it. I'm also not really looking for people to give me approval or validation and say that this Marseille is breathtaking, it's beautiful, it's one of a kind, it's amazing. I'm not looking for that. This is the example of my artistic process as saying, this is an experiment, this is an idea that I'm testing out, and I just want to get it done. And when it's done, when I finish a card, it's not, is this beautiful? It's, does this exercise the point? Did it bring me closer to what I'm looking for? And the Maximus Marseille, it's almost done. I'm gonna look at it. I'm actually looking at it right now, and I think for me, it does bring up some points about, like, what does it mean to be a Marseille? I think it's a conceptual art piece, and I think it does its job. And I like it as that. And I have a lot more opinions about this, but this isn't the Maximus Marseille podcast. The second main process I do is, I guess, do I have fun? Do I have fun? Is this a great exploration and use of my tools? And I don't think that's anything really unique. I don't think it's really unique to say, not that it's a bad thing, am I having fun? Am I doing this thing? But I just want to stress that for me, does it look good is not, it's not a priority. I don't really care, And that's not to say like there isn't art out there that I do make that I do care about. I'm just saying for the vast majority of my artwork that I share, it isn't, does it look good enough for someone to buy? If you like it and you want to buy it or a print of it, that's nice. I appreciate it and I thank you. And that also doesn't mean I'm giving up. I do different artistic studies into light and shadow and values and hues. Like I do work on being quote unquote a better artist. Because everything from art to things that you don't want to be good at, right? Like hyperfixating or putting yourself down. Everything is a skill that you can put more and more work into being better at or unlearning. And I do want to continue working on myself as an artist. But for the vast majority of the artwork, it's not about putting in all the work and energy for a photorealistic piece. It's just not. And it honestly can't be that way. It can't be that way for me. I have a lot of long-term projects for me that I have to balance. I have to balance my time. I have to balance my energy. There's this song by Melanie Martinez that I really like called Test Me. And I highly, highly, highly suggest that you listen to it. I love it. I got a lot personally out of that song. And one of the things I got from it is like, you're going to die one day. That day could be tomorrow. That day could be 10 years from now. You need to get whatever you want to get done. You need to get it out of you quick. You just do, I have all these artistic projects in my mind and I need to get them out. I do. I don't have a guaranteed infinity of time to say, I want to make a tarot deck, but maybe I should just spend 15 plus years on it. I don't have that. That is not guaranteed to me. Maybe for you, you have more of a guarantee and a sense of confirmation that you'll be taken care of for those 15 years. I do not have that, I need to get what I want to make and I want to see and what experiments I want to do. I have to get it out of me now. So part of me saying like the artwork doesn't have to look perfect, it is a concession in that I don't have all the time in the world. I have other projects I want to work on, but it's also me prioritizing the concept, the idea, the expression. That is what is important. It is important that I create with intent. It is important that I think with purpose and I build with purpose than, creating art for art's sake. There's definitely people who do make art for art's sake. For example, artist Jeff Koons, he's the person who makes the giant metallic balloon animal dogs, Don't like him as a person. And as an artist, his point of view is not something that I have the luxury of being able to sit with and enjoy. I just don't, The whole process of this art spread is I have to remind myself what's important, and that is my humanity. And a bit of that is community building and saying, like, I have to be there for other people and connect with other people. But also, it's like, you have limited time. You have to do as much as you can while you are here to make the world a better place. And if that means lighting a fire under your house, then you need to light that fire. And that's what I do. I have other long-term projects that I can't let be forgotten. I can't. I have other deck projects. I have book ideas. I even have like a board game that I really want to make. And I cannot expect that they will be created in due time. Just whenever I get to it. I personally believe that for me and myself as an artist, the artwork, it gets done when it gets done. Meaning, not that I can just give up and throw my hands up and say, eventually it'll happen the way it's meant to happen. But more of like, in due time, if I consistently work on it, it will get done. I think about if you write a page a day, every day, then at the end of the year, you have a book. You have a 365-page book. It's that sort of process, As long as I put the work in and the effort in, I can finish this project, this goal. And I really do use other goals and other ideas and other projects as sort of like a carrot on a stick to help push me through and over to work on the next project. Because for me personally, starting a project is easy. Working on it is easy. Finishing it, not so much. I'm thinking about like my abstract heart oracle deck, The cards were done. People said that a couple of them were repetitive. I understood that, so I removed those cards. I added new ones. I remade the artwork. I did a full, 180. And I have a working prototype, which is basically the one-to-one of what people will be buying. And I guess all that's really waiting is, the big guidebook. But now I'm like, maybe I'm using the big guidebook as a self-sabotage. To say, I can't sell this, I can't offer it without it being absolutely perfection. And perfection, it isn't. It's not going to happen. Here's what I do. If I have an idea of something I want to do and it's a big project, I write it down. And I have a folder and I put all of my big projects and big ideas in that folder. And it's not just like, oh, Maximus, write it down, put it in there. I say, this is the maximalist Marseille. This is the inspiration. This is the idea. Here is where I'm pulling it from. This is a question I want to ask. This is what it's going to look like. Like I write down every single thing that I can about that idea, and then I put it in the folder. And then over time, I finish one project, I have it printed, I take another idea out. And that's how I balance long-term projects. I'm not afraid to write down my ideas for later, because I know that I'm working as hard as possible to get the ideas out now. I just do. And hopefully that makes sense. I feel like there might be some concern, maybe, on, well, what if you make the thing and it isn't as beautiful and sparkly and creative as you want it to be? And to that, I say, if you are always to judge things by how perfect they are, consider what you'd be missing out. Consider what lessons you wouldn't be learning. Consider what you wouldn't know because, you quote-unquote judge the book by its cover. It didn't look good enough. It didn't look pretty enough. It wasn't perfect enough for you. There's a lot in this world that I've gotten out movies, books, TV shows, video games, um, tarot decks, that they weren't polished, quote unquote. They weren't perfect looking. I have a fair share of influences that I can see the flaws and I still enjoy them. And that's the point, It's not like I can't like this, I can't do it because, I notice one thing wrong, one problem. I have to get rid of it. I don't do that. I should probably mention that on top of these big term, long term projects, I also have small projects that I work on too that are just for me, that are just for fun. There's this artist on Instagram. I think he's Russian, maybe not. I think you say his name, Zekoro. I'm gonna put on the screen, but it's Zhekoro. And he creates these like abstract Dada-esque collages that I'm really getting into. I'm really getting into the notion and the idea of not wasting your art supplies and using them as much as you can. I want to work more on my collage. I know I just said, I don't judge my artwork by does it look perfect, but I do say like, the skill here, this application here, I could do more work on that. And with collage, I feel like I could do more work on practicing with collage. I want to do so much. I want to work on collage, I want to work on jewelry making, I want to do this and this and this. And I think my idea of writing down long-term projects in combination with my artistic process, which is just like, does it do the thing? I think that personally allows me a level of freedom in experimenting and doing things that I like and things that I want to do. It allows me to explore and experiment with new processes. I do personally believe, this is a side note, that like as a divinatory reader, you do get more out of experimenting and trying new things. I think that if you only read Rider-Waite-Smith style tarot decks, you do get something out of teaching yourself and learning how to read with oracle cards or Lenormand cards or playing cards or runes. The skills that you learn in these other like analogous practices, they're applicable for when you go back to tarot. And I believe the exact same thing when it comes to art. When you learn Lenormand, for example, there is that like card 1 plus card 2 is part of the sentence structure. The reading as a sentence structure overall. And when you go back to tarot, you use the same learned skills to become a better tarot reader. And for art, I'm working on this with watercolor, I'm working on this with acrylic, I'm working on this with collage, I'm working on this with mixed media, with clay, chalk pastels, oil pastels, crocheting, sewing, and I use skill from like part 1 and part 2, and I personally feel like it makes my art better. And that's something that my artistic process lets me do. It lends itself to me. And I think part of it is also like your priorities. I think if you're an artist, you should probably settle down into knowing what your priorities are. So for me, my artistic practice and my witchcraft practice, I am trying to influence it to have more bite. I'm trying to add more politics to it. So I feel like my voice is getting less nasally as this goes on, and that makes me a lot happier. But I want my witchcraft practice and my artistic practice to not be filled with this notion of like being apolitical, because like being apolitical doesn't exist. Your refusal to participate in the system does not mean that the system does not exist. I purposely made a Oracle deck just about like a good general all-purpose deck that you would see on the shelf, of like any traditional witch shop, but it also has activism as like a main point, a main tenet in its creation. And in my artistic process and who I am as an artist, I try to listen to the influences that have helped create me and not forget where I have come from. These artists before me who have influenced me, who have distinctly, like, whether they want to admit it or not, or raise it, political motivations that have inspired them. I love Dadaism. I love what Molly Roberts does with being eco-friendly. I love the history of art, and I'm thinking about some individual artists too that I particularly like. I like their art. I look up to. I may not know them one-on-one as like a parasocial degree, but I do like what they present as artists, and I value their input. I value what they bring to the table, and I want to emanate that in myself as an artist. Like, I'm thinking Inkwell on YouTube. Inkwell, he makes a lot of great videos for me of aspiration. And I think about like Galaxy Coop. I love a lot of her artwork and the way that she mixes, what's the word? Antiquity, right? Antiquity with a sort of like modernism that is creating what I need to find this word 1 second. Okay, I paused it just to Google it. Anachronism, right? This sort of like time-based anachronism where stuff from the past and stuff from the future is being mixed together in her artwork, purely from the point of view of like antique book plates recreated using modern watercolor paints made from expired makeup palettes. I think that's so genius and amazing. Or even like newer artists that I'm just now getting to hear about and find that are much smaller, but also participate in magic and witchcraft spaces with me, right? Such as like Magic Chicken House. I specifically appreciate their commitment to, I guess you could say, like the wild flora and fauna, of like crows that are one with like being an other, or like they're pecking at a pumpkin, or the sort of like Final Fantasy of like mother toads carrying their eggs, and they have this forest otherness that they are so willing to combine with comedy and absurdism that I really enjoy. And I'm not saying that I like these artists and I'm gonna like them forever. I'm not saying that that Russian collage artist, I'm gonna support him for the rest of my life. But what I'm saying is like, these are currently artistic voices that I like right now, that while I'm currently like, I'm pushing myself to create as much as I can, I'm also appreciating the artwork of others, and I'm letting that help refill my cup. I'm helping that expand my cup by how much I can love and support and uplift the other artists around me. And in some ways, steal from them. I love stealing. I love stealing so much. And I don't mean like I'm going to take their artwork and design and take it, but that collage artist I was speaking about earlier, I have a lot of art supplies that, to be quite frank and honest with you, it would be a waste. It would be a waste if I didn't use these art supplies in some way. And I need to not just play with them and have fun with them, but the whole point of using like thrifted art supplies is that you're keeping them out of the trash, and you're actively using them and appreciating them. But if you're not appreciating them, then what's the point? So that collage artist, I'm using him not just like as a source of inspiration, but I'm stealing from him in the way of like, I'm going to create collages myself. I'm going to use the trash in my life to create these abstract Dada-esque collages myself. And it won't be the same as his because, he has his own artistic style that I still appreciate. I saw a video of him where he was just walking around town and he started like ripping old posters that were like months old. Like you could not use these posters anymore. And it was using the lights and hues and shadows and textures of these posters in his collage. I'm not replicating that, I like his artwork. I like it a lot. And I'm using his artwork not just as inspiration, but this is someone who found his voice. I'm going to go be inspired by him and practice similar techniques to help finding my own voice in collage. And I think lastly speaking, that does participate in how do I refill myself and my cup on the go. I have in one of my first grimoires a list that says love you. I love you. And it's a list of different things that I personally enjoy, that I personally love, that whether it be for deep, meaningful meanings or shallow reasons, shallow, vapid reasons, I love these things. And I use sometimes these things to help refill my cup over time. So like, let's say, and this actually will be very relevant, I'll just speak on it right now. There is, in my Linktree, which I'm going to include in the bio, there is a raffle that I'm participating in where I've created coloring book pages for your grimoire as part of a raffle. And the raffle is to help raise money for Palestine. And I had pushed myself to create these coloring book pages. And it's going on as the exact same time as I found another person who I'm creating original paintings so that he can raffle and sell those for a donation. So I'm working on those paintings at the same time as I'm trying to work on a community grimoire so that people will not feel alone and scared and have those feelings of like, I don't have anyone that I can reach out to, especially as we enter into 2025 politically speaking. And that's going on at the same time as, I'm trying to work full-time as a day job and then also work full-time times 2 as like an artistic art job, full-time artist, even though I'm not getting full-time artist pay. And I'm doing that at the same time as this, at the same time as this, at the same time as this. Like I'm balancing many, many plates. And I'm using these things to refill my cup so I don't get burnt out. So I don't get worn out. So I don't, for lack of better words, wake up one day and I'm like, oh, why am I sick? I say that as like, I woke up today and I'm like, ooh, my little snivelly nose. But if I find myself in a creatively nose to the grindstone way, I can look at this list and I can use it to refill my cup. The Artist Way talks about having artist dates, and I do think that is very important to celebrate yourself and implement like a once a week, one day where you just celebrate yourself and yourself as an artist. And I'm not saying not to do that. But what I am saying is that your ability to love yourself and support yourself as an artist, it does not stop outside of that day. And it does not stop out of infiltrating your own life to fill it up with small little things that make you happy. you know? You being happy is not a luxury that is restricted just once a day per week. So if you will allow me to be vapid, I have things like root beer floats, soft poems, pride flags, fresh cut grass. I have these on my I love you list, I have Greek columns, holographic artwork, found beads, neon color signs, mermen, midnight. Just the concept of midnight, fortune cookies, clouds, new decks, geese. I love the idea of geese, such a beautiful, soft, gentle looking bird with a heart of violence. Something about that's so funny, so ridiculous, and I love it. Trinkets. I love my trinkets. I love my trinkets. One day I might show you my altar. It's consistently in flux because I use it as a space to kind of like hold on to some projects. So I'll say like, this is my altar setup and I'm using it to hold this, and this that I'm working on right now. They're like larger long-term projects. But outside of that, I will fill it with trinkets. I'll flood my altar with trinkets. And there's like an entire section in the middle where I just have trinkets everywhere. I particularly love taking embroidery floss and making like micro granny squares just for my altar too. But back to the point, I will use these things on my I love you list to kind of just infiltrate the life around me, to celebrate beauty and joy and allow myself these short moments of inspiration around me all the time. Like even right now, while I am recording this, I have things around me that I particularly enjoy, For my Grimoire Ramble, in the beginning and at the end, I have a prompt, and I have a document, basically, that, like, oh, hello, welcome to Grimoire Ramble, and right next to it, I have something that I really enjoy that I'm watching right now at the same time. Not all the time am I watching this, but right now I am. There's this term on TikTok right now about like dopamine decoration and the idea of decorating your home around things that make you happy, which is like the whole point, like maybe we don't need to create new terms for stuff that we're already doing, but it goes back to that, like, celebrating your life and creating an environment that is inductive to creation. Maybe organizing your art supplies, not just in a pleasing way, but also in a way that it's easier to put away. I think I saw that somewhere where the point isn't to organize it so it's easy to take out. The point is to organize it so it's easy to put away. As I am reaching the end of my time here with you, friend, I do want to mention that I did in the beginning that I have to re-film a bunch of my Grimoire Rambles. And in this case, I want you to know that I had decided that I wanted to get rid of this original video was like 3 audio clips. I wanted to get rid of the first one, which was the intro, and then the middle one, but the ending, which was the oracle reading that I like to leave off on, I decided to keep it. And I wanted to tell you why I'm keeping it. I hope that by watching and listening, you did get a lot of work done. I hope that you did drink a lot of water. I hope that you got a lot of progress forward in whatever you are working on. But the oracle reading at the end that I like to offer, it's not for just you, right? It's also for me. And I think that the oracle reading in question brought up a lot of good points for myself as well, which is why I want to leave it as original. there is some points, there's some messages, there's some things that I personally think that I will be coming back to, just as a reminder for myself. And as I have rambled on long enough over everything I want to talk about, I just hope that you found this Grimoire ramble helpful to you and illuminating as an example of like, this is how another artist thinks, this is how another artist processes their work. Maybe you can be an artist and it doesn't have to be how perfect your artwork looks. Maybe you don't have to be the most commercially successful artist, because money is one way to validate yourself as an artist, but it's not the only way. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and leave you with the oracle reading. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy it. Let's go ahead and wrap it up. Okay, and I know I said that I pre-recorded the ending, and I'm gonna be honest, I actually did, and then I erased it because I listened to it again and I was like, I don't like this, right? But as always, let me just go ahead and pull a quick card for you. This is to help us with the theme of injustice and politics in the world, but it's also with art, about us being artists. It's just a continuation with the themes that we discussed. And the card I'm pulling is going to actually be from the Misaligned Prayer Oracle deck. I should make a full video about this deck, and I will later. But quick run through, basically it's a deck, 20 different mediums. It's made to look like a community made it, so that it goes to the idea that we as a community can create the changes that we want, but we as individuals have to contribute to it, right? So the card I pulled was the Realized card. Realize. The Realized card's background is basically a Dadaist abstract collage of different receipts. And then the main image, I guess you could say foreground, the front of it, is a skull. And the skull has these two flames and its eye sockets looking directly at you. And it's crying one red drop. And I think the Realize, for me at least, in my first interpretation for this, it's kind of like a miniature or alternative tarot tower card, right? Whereas like the tower, it's like, oh, bad foundations, unstable ground, like your life is shaking up. That's about like pain, right? And I definitely do see pain here, but I see this more of like a sadness and pain. Realize as a card is realizing, wow, we actually could do more than we thought we could. Wow, I was actually being harder on myself than I thought I could. It's as saying like, oh, here are the things that we want to do, and we're thinking we're not good enough, we're not talented enough, we don't have the art supplies enough, we're not attractive enough, we're not smart enough, we're not wise enough, right? And then it turns out like it's honestly not that big of a deal. The difference between you and someone who made a deck is that they made the deck. The difference between you and someone who wrote the book is that they wrote the book, right? And there's something about the Realized card where it comes after the fact, the sense of sadness and saying like, I didn't think I was good enough, I didn't think I was smart enough, I didn't think I had the ability to do this, right? And that was a belief that I carried for so long. That was something that I thought for so long. I thought for so long that it was me, I was the problem. And specifically in like creative fields, in political fields, it's this feeling like I am not strong enough as an individual to create change. And the sadness in the Realized card is saying, realizing later on, like, oh, I was, I didn't have to donate, $50 million, but I could provide an ear to someone. I could give a can of food. I could just be there for someone, And the sadness that follows with, not only could I have been there for someone, but I could have done it the whole time, That was something that I could have done the whole time. And you can take those ideas, you can take the I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not wise enough, I'm not strong enough, I don't have the artistic ability, and you can see that as some shadow work that you have to do later on, right? You can, not even in the sense of, oh, I'm not good enough and I need to face that head on, but an understanding that you as a person, you as an artist, you as a person, as like a living being, you are an investment to yourself in however way you want to carry that, right? And if you say, I'm not smart enough, I'm not strong enough, I can't do that, I can't draw that, right? You now know, oh, I'm an investment, and here are the places and here are the ways that I need to put some energy into, some love into my cup, some extra investing into. Realize is saying that there was opportunities for you to create what you want. The answer was there. The answer was possible. The answer was present, right? And for those of us who are creatives, who are looking for doing something, like, not only was the answer was there, but we can just do it. You know, we can take advantage of the opportunities, or we can prepare for the opportunities, or case depending, you can create the opportunities yourself. Now, obviously, I don't know you. I am not sitting down with you. You're not paying me for this reading. But if you heard me speak about me as an artist this entire time and how all of this is wrapped up with this art spell that I'm working on, that you're watching me create, of me saying, like, we need more hope, we need more love, we need more action, we need more intent, right? And you had all these ideas of like, well, that kind of reminds me about this, and I wanted to do it, but it didn't work out. It wasn't the right time, you know? I couldn't cut enough time for me, right? There are answers available. That's what the Realize card is saying. Look at ways that you were saying this couldn't have happened and realize it could happen. And then ask, what is the distance between it couldn't have happened and has already happened? And find a way there. Okay, I think that's enough. Thank you for joining me so much, and I hope you have a great day, bestie. Bye.